DJI's Mavic Air 2 is one of their most advanced drones to date. It features almost everything that the Mavic 2 Pro offers from its hardware, with only a few small omissions, but it also has some really nice benefits over the Pro 2. And just like the original Mavic Air, it is a pleasure to fly. Or at least it was for the few months that I've had it. This isn't a review. This is me talking about how I've crashed and almost completely destroyed my Mavic Air 2 the other day. Before we get into the story of how I crashed, I wanted to tell you guys about the sponsor of today's video, Filmora 10. No matter what type of pilot you are, getting an edit of your footage done easily and quickly is essential to creating good content. And with Filmora's powerful feature set, it's never been easier to create an awesome sequence without a monthly subscription like other companies offer. With a fully fledged feature set all the way from the timeline to the visual effects, Filmora 10 is the perfect editing software for beginners to learn their craft or experts to get quick edits finished. Check it out at the link in the description and leave a comment down below to let me know what you'd like to edit with Filmora for a chance to win a free account and set your creativity free. So I've just started my filmmaking degree, and outside of lectures I've been trying to shoot as much video for my own personal use as possible. And I've shot a lot. From seagulls to a skateboarding short, I've been trying to build up a bank of footage over the past few weeks, and it's been a lot of fun. Some of what I've been shooting has also been with my drone. When there's a safe chance to go and shoot something from the sky, I am always ready to go. And with just how good video from the Mavic Air 2's camera looks, the beach seems like the perfect place to fly it, which is why I've been going there to film so much with my drone over the past few weeks. So just like a normal drone session, I took off and started accumulating some footage. I didn't have a specific target, so I had some fun with the waves and the coastline of where I was. And after a battery swap, a couple of images, and an extremely daring high-speed seagull tracking shot, which was totally worth this entire experience by the way, I decided it was time to bring the drone in and head home. With the tide rising gradually and the temperature already being cold, I chose to do a sport mode landing, something I've done many times before. Basically, I bring it in as fast as possible and then land it when it's hovering overhead. If you've ever flown a DJI drone before, then you'll know that its vision sensors will stop you from crashing into objects, or if you don't have the front and back ones, crashing into the ground. Because it was so dark, those sensors weren't active, so I was on my own. Maybe if I was in normal mode instead of sport mode, things would have been different, but it was still too dark for the vision sensors to work in the first place, so the outcome might have been similar, but maybe just less dramatic. What really happened was this. I turned the drone towards me, kept it coming in quick, and I lowered the altitude a little bit. Because I was in sport mode and the visibility was pretty terrible, I seriously overestimated the altitude of the drone. So by trying to eyeball it at high speed with poor visibility and no assistance from the vision sensors or the altimeter, I ended up crashing. Now I wasn't recording on the camera at the time, so all I have is the screen recording from my iPhone, but you can see a few things going on here just before the impact. Firstly, even now it is incredibly difficult to make out just how close the sand is to the drone when it's on its straight approach back. Once I realised what was going to happen, I pushed the throttle upwards, trying to regain some altitude and stop it from crashing. That was the one thing that maybe saved this drone from being completely destroyed. But I saw the crash happen from 120 meters away, which basically means I assumed everything was broken. Once I got over to the drone, I was pretty shocked to actually look at it, because it looked like it was in one piece. Considering it crashed at 37.5 miles per hour, there was some obvious damage to the camera which took the main force of the crash, and its roll axis arm had snapped completely, bringing the motor control cable with it, and leaving the camera dangling from its own cable, but still working. If I'd have got to the wreck and found the camera completely disconnected and no signal and loads of error messages, I may have just listed the drone up for sale and not even attempted to repair it. So after collecting all of the parts, I headed home and tore down the drone to check all of the internal components and take the camera unit off so I can repair it. I started by removing the bottom heatsink, the vision sensors and the mainboard to inspect it for damage. Somehow there wasn't any at all. Considering it landed on its belly, kind of camera first, there was no damage to the mainboard and not even to the heatsink. Despite how bad it looks on the surface, the only lasting damage was to the plastic mount for the roll axis. Everything else looked pretty much fine. I removed the camera from its tilt axis motor and unplugged the camera connector that links the board to the camera. I did the same for the ripped motor connector and made sure the damage hadn't affected any of the connections on the little circuit board. Somehow there was nothing out of the ordinary there, so a simple cable swap and a bit of glue and a bit of DIY will actually fix this. I found a couple of replacement cables on Amazon and eBay, but they were all in China, not a single one was in Europe or the UK, which basically meant I'd have to wait a while before I could even get this drone back in the air. So I ordered two, each from different sellers, so at least then I'd have a chance of one arriving if the other wasn't ever going to be shipped. About 2 weeks later, the first one showed up, so it was time to begin the repair. Now this is possibly the most painful repair on a device that I've ever done in my entire life. And I mean, I've repaired iPhones, I've repaired the Mavic Mini. When I crashed that, I took that one apart. That was easy compared to this. This thing was fiddly as hell. From doing the tiny connector on the camera, then moving on to the motor, and then going back up and through the third motor, which it turns out was the wrong order of doing things, I ended up doing everything about 3 times, and it took about 3.5 hours to get the whole thing back together and on the drone. Once the camera unit was back together, I put it back into the drone, bolted it in, and reconnected the 2 cables that it has to the main board. Now it's starting to look like a drone again, so after checking that everything was working indoors, it was time to take it outside for a test flight. And I was pretty nervous about this. I've seen what sand does to motors, I've crashed drones in sand before, and it is not pretty.
Yeah.
So the first few moments it was a little bit jumpy, possibly due to sand being caught in the motors, but after a little bit of time it turned back to being the same drone that I had before. And to be honest, I was amazed, considering the crash that it had. A 12-pound fix and a tiny bit of super glue would actually fix this drone and get it back in completely working order. Because the thing is, I absolutely love this drone. If I wasn't a fan, I probably would have listed it up on eBay for parts, but from a creative standpoint, there's no other drone that I could get along with quite as well as this. It's just incredible how well it kept up in the crash, and the fact that I was able to repair it in my university accommodation when I don't have all my normal tools or anything like that. I've literally got a 20-piece screwdriver set here, and I used that, repaired it, and it's back up in the air. I genuinely wasn't expecting it to fly and not have a single error message. When I crashed it, it had a navigation system error, it had the gimbal stuck, gimbal motor overloaded, a load of different things, IMU problems. I was expecting a lot more internal damage than external, but somehow none of that happened, and it was a full speed crash. Repairs like this aren't necessarily for inexperienced people, they're pretty fiddly and you can go wrong quite easily and break something, make everything a lot worse. It was a mess, I'll be honest, this whole experience was a mess, but I've learned quite a lot from it, mainly to do with how repairable this drone is, because it looks pretty damn easy to repair on the inside. Because the Mavic Air 2, I feel like it's my favourite drone of all time. I love the original Mavic Air, but with this drone for photography and for videography, it's absolutely incredible. It's basically fully fledged, it does 4K 60, the Mavic 2 Pro only does 4K 30. If that in itself isn't a reason to buy this drone, I don't know what is. I haven't found a drone that I've enjoyed quite as much as this one, and I cannot wait to get started with my long-term review.